exclusive. What really happened from the classroom to the hotel room to their own home.
In your son's bed.
In my son's bed.
And for the first time, the surveillance videos from inside the school, the hotel, and the selfie the teacher took with the boy of them kissing. This evening, new outrage for those parents after learning that teacher's fate.
That's it. She just crossed the line.
Also tonight, the beautiful daughter who looked nothing like her father. Suddenly, the entire family finds out why.
And it said that they shared 0 DNA.
Duke Fertility Clinic, it wasn't Dad's DNA, it was the lab tech's.
And he gave me this just sort of evil smile.
And tonight, is that worker the father to hundreds of children?
This is so creepy.
The 2020 investigation. And a very personal note about our friend, our colleague, and her brave journey. What Elizabeth revealed today about her own private struggles.
The amount of energy I expended keeping that secret was exhausting.
Tonight, Elizabeth is back.
Here now, David Muir and Elizabeth Vargas.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us tonight, and let me just say, it is great to have you back.
It's great to be back, and thank you for all your support, and thank you to all our viewers as well. It really meant a lot to me, and I'll be talking a little bit later in the program about where I've been and the work I've done, and share a little bit about that.
And a member of your family is here tonight.
I know.
This is a very brave evening for you, and we know that, and we'll get to all that a little later. I know you want us to start with the news
Yes,
first.
let's go.
So let's begin. We begin here tonight with that headline that rocked the city of Houston this week, the pretty middle school teacher and the boy whose parents trusted the teacher to help him. Instead, what would follow would be any parent's nightmare. Tonight, the parents and that boy sitting down only with 2020.
Are new developments in the case of a local middle school teacher caught having sex with a child? Late today, she received her punishment.
It's the story thrust back into the spotlight just this week. After the first headlines shocked much of Houston, a parent's nightmare come true.
He's a child. That's what the law said.
A married school teacher they had trusted with their son was having sex with him. And tonight, for the first time, the secret that began in classroom 308 is finally unraveling. Alex and Jenny Pillay will never forget that first day at Memorial Middle School, one of the top schools in Houston, bringing their son to that front door, newly adopted, rescued from distant relatives, from a life of poverty in Costa Rica. They began the adoption process when he was just 9 years old. It took 5 years to get him here.
Do you remember the trip to go get him, to bring him to America?
Oh, definitely. He was so excited. Oh my God, this is my new life.
His new life in America?
In America. When we arrived to Houston, and he was so surprised, amazing, looking at the buildings, how tall the buildings were, and he was so happy to be at his new home.
And soon, his new school.
I walked Jimmy to school. He was very nervous.
Do you remember your first day of school?
I didn't like it.
So you walked into that school not speaking a word of English?
No. I knew just hello and that's it.
You said to Jimmy, you will survive this.
Oh, yes.
It will get better.
It will get better.
The boy came to America with big dreams of playing soccer, of college one day. One of his first trips to NASA with his new parents. This is the young face of the boy who was also getting help at his new school. There was an English teacher assigned to give him that extra help with his classes, 28-year-old Catherine Camille Murray, who was married. Some of the boys thought Ms. Murray was pretty.
Do you remember the first time you met her?
Yes.
Was she nice?
Yes, she was nice. She started helping me a lot with my homework.
Jimmy found comfort in her classroom.
You would take all your other classes and then you would go to her at the end of the day for help or sometime during the day for her?
Yes. I started liking the feeling that I was feeling for her.
The teacher and student were growing closer.
When do you start hearing about Ms. Murray?
We went to the open house, and I said, "Hello, Miss Murray, I'm Jimmy's mom." And immediately she looked at me and says, "Oh, Jimmy's my favorite student, and he's so well behaved."
Really? That struck you as strange?
And I thought it was kind of strange.
And what was Jimmy saying about Ms. Murray at home?
"Oh, she's so pretty." And I said, "Yeah, she's a pretty lady."
Hey, every kid goes through that. It's a crush on a teacher.
So you're thinking this is our adolescent son?
This is an adolescent son with just a simple crush. That's it, but nothing of it.
And in all of his classes, Jimmy is getting A's and B's.
So it was like, okay, so she's actually doing good for him, help.
But there was more. At school, Jimmy says there was something about the way she would look at him.
When you would walk into that room, would she smile?
She loved me different.
She looked at you differently.
Yes.
Is that when you sensed that she had feelings for you too?
Yes.
Before Christmas break, he writes a note revealing his love for his teacher, but then tears it up into pieces and gave it to her to throw away. Instead, she keeps the letter, and when he returns to school, surprise.
she said, I read your letter.
She put it back together.
Yes. And she told me, I really like you, for real. And said, I really like you. And she told me, I know, but we can have anything.
She told you you
Yes.
couldn't have anything.
Jimmy is staying after school nearly every day now. Then one afternoon, he doesn't come home from school. His parents frantically begin looking for him through the empty hallways everywhere. Even classroom 308. His father finds the custodian.
We saw the custodian lady. She said they were just here. They left,
There was no sign of him. Suddenly, Jimmy appears at home.
holding his arm like this.
With blood.
He couldn't. He had no words. And as soon as he spoke, it just started crying.
He would cry for nearly an hour and then offer a story. Jimmy told his parents he'd been in the car with Miss Murray and they had an argument.
He just told us that he was in the car. He jumped out of the car.
So it's like, what happened? And the only thing he said was, I told her that I like her.
And my wife were looking at each other. Okay, so this sounds like a lover's quarrel.
They immediately reach out to Miss Murray, but she mentions nothing about Jimmy in her car.
So at that moment, you think there's something going
It's
on.
going on. She is lying.
They tell Miss Murray their son needs to be taken out of her class. She says she'll move him. Weeks go by, life at home returns to normal.
Every night, you
Every
sit
night.
down at the dinner table,
All four sit at the dinner.
Yeah.
and he'd stop talking about
Yes.
this
We
movie.
stopped talking about this
We
part.
go, okay.
We thought it was over.
But it was far from over. They were now talking on Facebook. Jimmy says he messaged Miss Murray that he wanted to kiss her, and then she replied, I want to see that.
She wanted you to kiss her.
Yes. Monday, I came to my school early. I walked straight to her. I kissed her. When I stopped kissing her, I walked to my first class.
You were thinking to yourself you had to get back to her.
Yes.
So you went back to her. You asked her how she felt about what happened.
Yes, and she told me, okay, I want you to kiss me again. So that's when I kissed her again.
That's when everything started.
Yes.
Physically.
Mm-hmm.
Did she ever say to you, this is wrong?
No, after I kissed her.
And tonight here, look at this. For the first time on 2020, the school surveillance tapes showing the teacher meeting privately in her classroom behind closed doors over and over again with her middle school student. She can be seen scanning the hallway, sometimes walking out with Jimmy. Other days, they leave in different directions. While at home, what Jimmy's parents think is a welcome sign to school dance. And Jimmy wants to go with the friends he's now made. No sign of Miss Murray.
And are you hoping that Jimmy's going to find a girl his own age to have a crush on?
Of course.
Of course.
But the girl waiting at the dance, Ms. Murray, across the street from the school, in the church parking lot, his dad had no idea.
I dropped him off, and he saw me leaving, and then he moved over to meet her across the street.
And she's waiting in, of all places, the church across the street.
Yes.
So you would talk to Miss Murray during the day. You said, my dad's going to bring me to the dance, and the two of you had a plan.
Yes.
The boy she'd been warned to stay clear of, she was now taking away from that school dance. She had her playlist. Tonight, 2020, obtaining the video, the images the night she checked into a nearby hotel, then bringing her teenage student through that side door.
Did anything happen in the hotel?
Yes. We have sexual relations.
You had sex with her.
Yes.
A secret the teacher helped Jimmy keep, but not for long. Suddenly, a disturbing phone call from the principal.
He confided in the
Yeah.
other teacher that he had kissed Miss Moore.
Yes.
That I kissed Miss Murray.
Yes.
That's correct.
And then, the selfies. The photographs they took of themselves kissing. Images that would break a mother's heart. And tonight, for the first time here, we see them after becoming a key part of this case. Then, another major blow. Jimmy and his mother sitting together when suddenly the mother's cell phone goes off. She'd let Jimmy borrow it, and that teacher, Ms. Murray, was now texting Jimmy. But the mother was receiving the message. The teacher's message, you know I love you. I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to be happy together. I miss you. A mother, looking down at her cell phone, stunned.
I said, Jimmy, I need to go to the restroom. I had to put water on my face. And I said, okay, this is not happening.
And that mother had not even heard the worst of it. When we come back, all of this suddenly gets much closer to home.
He says, Mama has something to tell you. That smile you have in your face is going to go away when I tell you this.
You won't believe where this goes next.
Continues with David Muir.
It's a hall of shame filled with unlikely faces, female teachers entrusted to protect, who instead preyed on their male students. Names like Deborah LaFave, convicted of abusing a 14-year-old. Mary Kay Latorno, who had sex with her 12-year-old student. She famously told the world their love was real.
I felt a very deep love for him.
And tonight, at the head of that infamous class now, Ms. Murray, 28, married, and sleeping with the boy who had just come to America with his new parents and his new dreams. And the mom who so tried to protect him, it was all crashing down. That text that came to her phone, the teacher, thinking she was texting Jimmy, saying, "I love you, I miss you." And now her younger son at home was troubled too. Something wasn't right.
So your youngest son isn't leaving his room?
No.
For days.
And when the younger brother, just 12 years old, finally emerged from his bedroom, his mother could not believe what he told her.
Fernando came to me and says, "Mama has something to tell you." I said, "What is it?" He says, "That smile you have in your face is going to go away when I tell you this. She was here." I said, "What do you mean she? Who is she?" He says, "Catherine Moore was here." I said, "What?" He says, "Mom, they had sex."
The little brother had stumbled in on them while looking for the family dog.
He says, "I saw her bra and I saw a couple of condoms on the floor."
The teacher had been in their own house.
This notion that this teacher would come into your home and get into your son's bed with him.
I mean, this is just sick.
This was now an outraged mother on a mission.
And I said, "I need to prove this person was in my house." That's it. She just crossed the line. I put some gloves and I took everything I can take from my son's bedroom. All the covers, pillows, and I called the police. And I said, "Okay, do the DNA. Let's prove she was there or not." And it was positive.
Yeah, DNA from the sheets proved that she was there.
This is the same teacher who weeks and weeks before you had called the school and said, "Keep her away from my son."
Yes.
The same teacher they had once thanked for helping their son who spoke so little English.
I keep sending emails. "Thank you for taking care of my son. Thank you for caring about my son."
Now armed with the teacher's DNA, the case moves quickly. 15-year-old Jimmy and his 12-year-old brother suddenly swept into it, sitting across from investigators. Jimmy determined to protect his teacher.
So you've been brought to a room where investigators were asking you
Yes,
what happened.
my brother went first, and then me. I started lying. I started saying, "I just kissed her."
The investigators said to you they already knew the truth.
Yes. And I said, "Okay," and I started telling the truth. I said, "Yes, I have a relationship with her, and we have sex."
Miss Murray is quickly arrested and charged with sexual assault of a child. She's released on bail, but ordered to stay away from Jimmy. And there is relief at Jimmy's house. He's now back at school, captain of the soccer team, and the family is back at the dinner table. Months would go by, he begins to open up to his mother.
He started to tell you,
he
piece by
started
piece,
telling
how soon.
details, very hard details for mom to hear.
He tells her that it wasn't just their house or that hotel, that the sex had all started in that classroom, room 308. And not only does he tell his mom, he tells police, who start scouring that surveillance video all over again, looking for even more evidence that there it is, Jimmy leaving Ms. Murray's classroom on the afternoon he says they first had sex. Just 6 minutes later, watch as Ms. Murray comes out of that same room.
School surveillance showed that they were leaving her classroom on Tuesday, February 7th at 5:15 p.m., and the school records show that school is regularly dismissed at 3:30 p.m.
Ms. Murray is now charged with 2 more counts of sexual assault on a child and 1 count of an improper relationship with a student. She is ordered now to wear an ankle bracelet. And as the months go by, those parents are learning more and more about how they say Ms. Murray lured their son in. Jimmy's dad reads to me the notes prosecutors say the teacher wrote to their son.
So this is a poem she wrote to your son.
That is correct.
And what does it say?
It says, "Because of you, I crave, I desire, I hope, I learn, I love, and because of you, I do not hate myself."
This is from the teacher.
This is from the teacher to my son.
And after all they'd been through, all they had learned, their son suddenly seemed to be pulling away yet again. Unbelievably, it was back on. Jimmy had started secretly seeing Ms. Murray.
Were you thinking to yourself, I shouldn't be doing this?
Yes.
But when you saw her,
All the feelings that I felt for her came back.
His parents now suspect that even with that ankle bracelet and facing a possible 20 years in prison, that Ms. Murray was still toying with their son's emotions.
these parents were in tune with their son.
Absolutely.
They hire a private investigator to follow him. But that very night, sitting out front, the investigator sees Jimmy leave through a window in the middle of the night, a friend driving him. That investigator taking us back along that fateful route.
I was following down the freeway. I'm thinking, wow, this is really happening. Wow, those parents knew exactly what they were saying.
They knew this teacher hadn't stopped.
I said, okay.
The private eye suddenly finding herself in front of Ms. Murray's father's house.
How quickly do you call Houston police?
Once I saw Jimmy get out of the car and go inside, I picked up the phone and called the HPD number and told them that I was case involving Miss Murray, and they recognized the name instantly.
She calls Jimmy's parents, too.
As we're driving to Miss Murray's father's house, I'm calling the police. I'm saying, I'm the father. This is the case number, and when we got there were 7 police cars.
Now, the parents, the private eye, and the police, in a dramatic confrontation surrounding the house, guns drawn. Inside, the teacher and the middle school student.
They got in the bullhorn and said, Miss Catherine,
She was now opening the door.
Houston police, open the door.
When we come back. The story that began in classroom 308 in this Houston middle school involving the 28-year-old married Ms. Murray and the student she met at 14 at the beginning of the school year was about to take yet another dramatic turn. The adopted boy who spoke not a word of English was getting help from her at the start of the year. Soon much more inside that classroom. Prosecutors say she was writing love notes to the boy.
Write with me. You're already my muse. I think we could create something amazing together.
You are already my muse, she says.
Yes. He's providing an illusion to him. He's giving him an basically a fantasy.
But now that fantasy was meeting reality. The teacher, in a standoff with police, caught at her father's house with her teenage student inside. The home surrounded. Ms. Murray has no choice but to give herself up.
Were you there?
Yes.
When she came out of that house?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we were there. I
we
want to
were
make
there.
sure she'd see us.
Yeah.
Was she in handcuffs?
Oh, yeah.
She was in handcuffs.
Oh, yeah, they had like 16
Yes.
police.
Finally, for the parents, relief that Miss Murray was locked up and away from Jimmy. But then, the new challenge. A son who was falling into a dangerous depression, feeling he was the one guilty for putting the teacher there.
Were you having suicidal thoughts?
Yes, a lot.
What were you thinking?
That maybe if I was going to kill myself, they forgot about this.
You were thinking if you killed yourself,
Yeah,
everyone would forget about this.
yes.
Alex, what's the hardest part for you?
You're dropping off your kid at a psychiatric ward. He's trying to kill himself. He believes his life is worthless. And you feel so helpless. It's a feeling that no parent should go through.
Tonight, Jimmy says he's doing better, telling me he can finally smile again.
Do you now see that there's a future?
I know that there is a future.
You know there's a future?
Yes.
And late this week, the future of Miss Murray decided.
Former teacher in Houston was sentenced.
Former teacher in the Spring Branch ISD learned her fate today.
That blonde teacher who the boys in school once thought was pretty, with a changed appearance, she's already pleaded guilty and now about to learn her fate.
I think she crossed the line as far as you can go. It's a huge violation of trust. All of us as parents have a right to know that when we send our children to school, they're not just going to learn, they're going to be safe.
The judge sentencing Ms. Murray. She'll spend 1 year in jail and then probation. She was told she cannot see Jimmy, and she gave up her teaching license. She will also have to register as a sex offender. And then everyone in that courtroom saw that smile to her family as she left the court. And when Jimmy's parents, sitting right there, heard 1 year in jail, they were aghast.
Had this been a 27-year-old man abusing a 15-year-old girl, the judgment there would have been completely different.
What has she done to your son's life?
I think it took his innocence away, because that was his first time having sex. He robbed him of his childhood.
Miss Murray, her family, and her defense team have repeatedly turned down requests from 2020 to talk about the case. They cite her ongoing treatment for bipolar disorder. Her attorney only saying this as he left the courthouse.
We will respect the family's request to keep this private, and that's all we have to say.
What's been the hardest part for you?
It's like you had the boy with all the dreams, and then you have a boy thinking that his life is over. So instead of looking him going to the soccer game and being so happy, this is nothing in your life. We brought you here to be happy, have a future.
They have repeatedly told their son he should have never crossed that line, and that regardless of what that teacher told him and wrote to him in those notes, none of it was right.
Do you still love her?
Yes.
In the same way?
No.
Do you think you'll see her again one day?
Maybe.
Tonight, with 1 year in jail for that teacher, there is still fear at Jimmy's house. Fear that the teacher, now getting divorced, will try to see their son again. That same teacher teacher who first met Jimmy around the time this photo was taken, his first trip to NASA, in his first few weeks of school. That young face, now forever changed. And a mom who tonight says she will never give up, trying to protect her son.
And we don't know what is going to happen. And that's the biggest fear I have.
Your biggest fear is?
Oh yeah, that's the biggest. He is still a child, and he was a child. And that's what we're asking for, justice.
We thank those parents for sharing their story with us. So what do you make of the sentence for that teacher tonight? Tweet me, use the hashtag ABC2020. And next year, the 2020 investigation tonight, hundreds of parents who put their trust in a fertility clinic just now finding out who really fathered their children when we come back.
Next, the sperm donor scandal. A lab technician switching father's samples to his own DNA.
This wasn't a mistake. This was done intentionally.
When we return.
How did a beautiful girl grow up with loving parents and have so little in common with them? Not their looks, not their skills, and that's just the start of a mystery now being solved, and all leading back to a strange man in a fertility clinic, a man who could have deceived hundreds of families in the worst possible way. Here's Cecilia Vega. It started off as a hobby, researching family history.
So it gets addictive.
Yep, and boy, did I get bit by the bug.
But what Pam Branham uncovered would reveal an unthinkable secret about her 21-year-old daughter. It involves a fertility clinic and a monster unleashed from the grave.
Stunning story, bizarre story. They are warning others about
Convicted felon.
It shakes your world, absolutely, because everything that you knew to be true all of a sudden wasn't.
You know, you're like pinching yourself going, this is like the worst dream I've ever had. I'm going to wake up, and it didn't happen.
It happened.
It happened.
It happened in Salt Lake City. Newlyweds John and Pam Branham are trying to start a family with no success. So as a last resort, they go to a fertility clinic here on the campus of the University of Utah. A friendly lab, but something about the lab tech doesn't sit right with John.
I remember handing him the sperm specimen, and he gave me this just sort of evil smile. It just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I thought, whoa.
John's reaction is soon forgotten, though. The arrival 9 months later of a beautiful baby girl, Annie.
Couldn't have been happier. Not a creature was stirring.
Flash through the years.
First steps. Look at her, yeah.
And the memories.
She's musically inclined, and we always kind of wonder where that came from.
Annie grows into a beautiful, bright young woman, a college whiz kid who studies astrophysics and surprises her parents with her gift for math.
I barely made it through Calculus 1. Well, in Annie's second year of college, she was doing Calculus 3, making A's, and I'm thinking, there's a recessive gene at work there, right?
With her nest now empty, Pam picks up a hobby and gets hooked on researching the family tree.
She'd be up to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning doing this.
These days, anyone can stick a swab inside their cheek, go online, and for a few bucks, discover relatives and health histories they never knew they had. Pam Branham swabbed the whole family.
I thought it was really interesting how it tells you about your health, it tells you where you come from.
As expected, when the results come back,
you can see how it's totally lit up.
Pam finds that Annie shares 50% of her mom's DNA. But what about her dad?
And it said that they shared 0 DNA. I was in a panic. I was in a complete panic.
Annie walked through the door, didn't say a word, gave me a big hug, started sobbing.
I think it took a very long time for it to sink in.
What was it that sunk in?
Trying to comprehend what it meant that he wasn't my biological father, and then who is.
The Branhams say they couldn't get answers from the university. It would take a DNA detective to get to the bottom of it.
They wanted to know what her biological heritage was on her paternal side.
Finding biological fathers is a specialty of C.C. Moore, a genetic genealogist in Southern California. Desperate for answers, Pam sends her an email.
This is right up my alley.
She tells Pam to send Annie's DNA to multiple online databases.
And in this type of work, we always say if we can find a second cousin or a predicted second cousin, we're pretty much in business. We can usually solve the case.
Moore's hunch pays off, and the plot thickens with a single match between Annie's DNA and this total stranger in Minnesota, Carla Evans. What this retired school secretary knows will blow open the whole story.
she asked me if I had a relative that might have donated sperm. And I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I did.
And I said, well, can you tell me where he lives?
And I said, well, he lived in Salt Lake City a lot. And I know he used to work for a fertility clinic there.
And I thought, okay, that's it. That's it.
That relative was Carla's cousin, Tom Lippert. Pam and Carla exchange photos, and suddenly, pieces of the puzzle start falling into place.
When I first saw Annie's graduation picture, it looks almost identical to Tom's graduation picture. When I saw that photo, I just knew that Tom was the father.
She also recalls some things that might explain Annie's interest in music and her college ambitions.
Well, Tom was very talented. He was very intelligent. He went to Notre Dame Law School. He was also musical.
And I looked at those pictures and I recognized him.
You recognized him?
He was the man at the clinic. I could picture all those baby pictures behind him, the ones that he was so proud of.
Oh, he made a big deal out of the fact that these were all the families that I've helped conceive.
This is so creepy. Picturing him sitting next to that wall is chilling.
And I just thought to myself, this wasn't a mistake. This was done intentionally.
But the story dead ends in a cemetery. Tom Lippert died in 1999. Case closed. Until, that is, Carla Evans drops a bombshell.
And said, Pam, there's something I need to tell you, and I want to be totally upfront with you about who my cousin was and what he did.
Tom kidnapped this young woman.
That's right. Tom Lippert was a convict, a kidnapper who gained national attention in 1975, sentenced to 6 years in prison for abducting a young woman. The details would unhinge everyone. He held her for 3 weeks, sometimes in a metal-studded box.
For me, that was as devastating almost as finding out.
After getting out of prison, Lippert married a nurse, Jean, and settled in this quiet Salt Lake neighborhood. He terrorized the neighborhood kids.
We were so scared we would walk on the other side of the road.
Tessa Murdoch says Lippert threw rocks, broke windows, and even made the local news.
Did you throw these rocks last night?
Absolutely not.
I never knew why he hated kids so much.
Ironic, because hating kids didn't stop him from conceiving them, swapping his sperm for that of patients while working as a lab tech in the fertility clinic at the University of Utah. At the time, the clinic did not do criminal background checks on prospective employees.
We are deeply sorry for any anxiety this has caused to our patients.
Finally, this week, the university admitted that many lab records were destroyed. They can only guess how many sperm samples were handled or mishandled by Tom Lippert. Cases could soon be coming out of the woodwork.
Let's just say 1,000 might be an estimate of people who might be affected.
DNA detective C.C. Moore created a blog that's already gotten responses from at least 5 more possible Lippert offspring, who'd be Annie's half-siblings.
Do you think there are other families out there right now who were duped just like you?
I know it. I know without a doubt. I'm starting to hear from them.
I wouldn't wish this on any other family.
Still, the Branhams know their turmoil is far outweighed by the one beautiful blessing that came out of it, their daughter, Annie.
What have you learned about yourself, about your family?
That we're just the same.
My dad is dad, regardless of whether or not he's biologically related to me. He's the one who raised me.
When we return, Elizabeth Vargas speaking out for the very first time.
I started thinking, well, I'll only drink, on weekends. I'll only drink, 2 glasses of wine a night.
Battling and overcoming addiction. Next.
And now a very personal note about my friend who's back with us after a brave journey.
This morning, Elizabeth's return on Good Morning America.
And we are thrilled to be welcoming back Elizabeth Vargas to ABC News.
After bravely tackling a very personal struggle, she shared with viewers something she knows many families have also faced.
I guess the best way to do this is to get right to it. Mm-hmm. You're an alcoholic.
I am an alcoholic. It took me a long time to admit that to myself. It took me a long time to admit it to my family, but I am. And I think part of the reason it's hard to admit is I had a lot of shame and a lot of guilt about it.
It must have taken so much effort to keep that secret.
The amount of energy I expended keeping that secret and keeping this problem hidden from view, hidden from my family, hidden from friends, from colleagues, was exhausting.
And when Elizabeth took time off to get help, her private battle suddenly became a very public one.
I didn't choose to go public with this. Somebody else made that decision for me. But in hindsight, in retrospect, maybe it's a blessing because it relieves me of that secrecy and that burden of walking around through life living behind a facade, which is what you do.
She says the alcoholism stems in part from another struggle, one that has shadowed her since Elizabeth's mother told me she remembers it too.
Did you see the anxiety attacks as a little girl?
Yes, I clearly saw them. And every morning when I would leave to go to work, she would cry and beg me not to go, and it was hard for her, it was heartbreaking for me, and her daddy was gone and she didn't want her mommy to leave. So I think the anxiety started then and probably carried with her forever, in one form or another.
Even with her steady hand at the anchor desk, Elizabeth now says the anxiety, the panic, were always close behind.
And at some point along the way, I dealt with that anxiety, and with the stress that anxiety brought by starting to drink. And it slowly escalated and got worse and worse. I should have realized it was a problem way back when Zachary, my oldest son, was born, and he used to call my nightly glass of wine Mommy's juice. And I thought that was hysterical. It didn't occur to me that that was a problem. And it didn't really get to be a huge problem until the last few years. And I actually started reporting on it. I've done like a half dozen 2020 hour-long specials on drinking, specifically women in drinking and mothers in drinking. These women who opened their homes and their private lives to us, letting us in on the most intimate and embarrassing moments.
Elizabeth says over time, she realized she shared something in common with many of the brave people she had interviewed.
You make all sorts of deals with yourself. I started thinking, well, I'll only drink, on weekends. I'll only drink, 2 glasses of wine a night. I'll only drink, I won't drink on nights before I have to get up and do Good Morning America. But those deals never work, and you're only fooling yourself.
Perhaps fooling herself, but she says not her husband, singer-songwriter Mark Cohn.
My husband knew I had a problem.
What did he say?
You have a problem. You're an alcoholic. And it made me really angry. But he was right. And it took me a long time to finally accept that. It took a long time. I mean, denial is huge for any alcoholic, especially for any functioning alcoholic.
She says the denials all came to an end on a Saturday afternoon when she arrived at a shoot for work.
When I got out of the car, I realized, what am I doing? I am in no shape to do this. And that's when I knew I need to get help. I went to a rehab that specializes in treating trauma. They don't just deal with drinking or drug use, in the case of others there. They deal with why you're drinking. What is it you're trying to cover up? What is it you're trying to numb?
A devoted mom, she was very aware of the toll on her family, on her boys.
And we explained that I was going away to get better. And they came and visited me, and they got to see where I was staying and meet the doctors there and ride a horse.
She came home before doctors wanted her to, and soon realized she had more work to do.
And I went back and finished and stayed until the doctors there said I was ready to come back. And this isn't what I want to be known for, but I'm really proud of what I did. And I feel so much better now, not having to walk around with this enormous burden.
Always. And this evening, also watching her parents. Mom and Dad rooting for their daughter in her brave fight to get back.
You've been with Elizabeth as she returns to work this week, and you've seen how all of us are quite proud of her. And I was just curious how a mom feels watching her return.
Coming forward like this is not easy, and I think we're especially proud of that.
She said that she never wanted to be the face of this, but that if in doing this she could help just one person out there.
David, we heard from so many people after it became public what she was dealing with. We were really astonished, and we're very proud of her for saying, I'm going to talk about it and tell people what I've been through, how it happened, and how I'm back here.
And then get back to work.
Get back to work.
In typical Elizabeth fashion.
In typical Elizabeth fashion, right. Yeah.
It's always embarrassing to have the entire world know your deepest, darkest secret. And yet, at the same time, I think it'll be a relief. I think in the long term, it will be ultimately a blessing, because I can be free about it. I'm not hiding anymore, and that's hard, but it's also a relief.
So that you can be free about it. And you heard me talk to your mom about it right there. That's something that you had said to me in the very beginning about all this, which is that you had never wanted to be the face of really anything like this. But you said this, it was powerful, that if you could help one person then it would be worth it.
You know, I didn't seek help for a long time because I had so much shame and guilt around this. So if speaking out maybe makes somebody feel less shameful about it.
I think he's insane. I think he's evil as evil could be.
All the way through, this guy is a serial murderer.
When I was standing next to him, every instinct in my body was somebody should put a gun to his temple and pull the trigger.
He loves Jesus for real. So I let him tell his story to me. Guard opened the door and there he was. Smiling, going, I knew you were Jesus. You come to take care of me.
Had Clark started worshiping Jack Truitt because he thought Jack Truitt was Jesus Christ.
I beat him up a lot. He would ask me, this is supposed to be nonviolent. I said, yeah, but I'm trying to beat the devil out of you.
And then, the worst thing of all, he murders a little girl.
He wrote his whole diary out to me. I asked him, I said, why did you do this to these people? He said, I saw my father do it. He's told me he's killed people in Provincetown, Block Island.
Probably killed several people up in Massachusetts.
When he was in the Navy, he said he killed people in every port he was in. He said, I liked what she had on. I put her clothes on after I killed her. All these pictures that he drew were crime scenes.
About 70 miles an hour. He is just evil incarnate. As soon as he gets out, we're going to track him down, and we have to put him in the ground. We're going to kill him.
My name is John Patrick Truitt. Most people know me as Jack, because I don't like John. The biggest Johns in the world, but the only time I got called John is when they put me in prison. In 1999, I was doing a life sentence for murder. One of the jurors, I had dated his daughter, and he did not like me. It wasn't a good trial. I'd been in prison for 26 years, never expected to get out. I was being transferred to another jail, along with about 8 of us. This guy that got on the bus with all of us was doing this, walking back and forth, going, making this god-awful weird-ass smile. Which, you don't do that in prison. You don't stare at somebody, especially the way he was staring at me with this grin. Like you would see in one of them movies, like the Joker. Crazy. I said, God, I hope that's the last I see of him. We get to the cell. The door opens, and there he is. I'm thinking, this ain't right, man. He looked at me and he goes, Jesus, I know God sent you to me. I have a lot to talk to you about. I said, no, you don't. I got up in the bed, turned my back on this guy, and went to sleep. The next morning I wake up, he's sitting over on the toilet just writing. He told me, I'm going to tell you everything I did so I can be forgiven. He really believes that I'm Jesus Christ. He had to confess to me. that he killed someone in every state in the United States. I'm like, who is this guy? He's going, nobody knows this. But I know where Michelle's buried. I said, the hell is Michelle?
I remember when Michelle was turning 6, she had her birthday party arranged for her class to come to Chuck E. Cheese. I'm Carl Dorr, Michelle Dorr's father. And I have this picture in my mind of her doing the can-can with the little girls and boys and just giggling and having a good time.
Michelle Dorr's a cute little 6-year-old with brown hair and a bubbly personality. I am Jim Trusty, and I worked at the state's attorney's office in Montgomery County. Unfortunately, she was a kid that was going through some tough times in terms of a pretty, what's the word I use? A pretty angry divorce.
On Memorial Day weekend, 1986, Michelle's mother, Dorothy, had made plans to travel to Virginia Beach, visit her family. I had physical custody of Michelle. I thought we would just have a nice leisurely May 31st. I would do whatever Michelle wanted that day. My time was her time. It was a very hot day. I stuck a hose in the kiddie pool in the backyard, went back to the house, watched the Indianapolis race.
Carl knew she was going to be out in the yard, and he kind of settled into watching the race, and the hours really passed without any sort of event.
Michelle came inside the house, saw her get the multicolored towel that she was carrying, go out the back door, felt that I heard that Jeff's children were home. Jeff Clark was another separated father who had good friends of Michelle's at the time, Elizabeth. I assumed that Michelle was outside next door at the Clark family.
My name is Jeffrey Clark. Michelle was a family of divorce, and so she came to visit her dad every other weekend. She would come over and she made friends with Elizabeth. So it wasn't unusual for us to come home from not being here and find her sitting on the front stoop waiting.
5:45, I walked over to the Clark house, looked in the backyard. There was the Clark family. I asked them, "Where's Michelle?" And then Jeff said, "Well, she's not here." And I said, "What do you mean she's not here?" "She's been here playing with Elizabeth." No, Elizabeth hasn't seen her. That didn't register at all. So that completely freaked me out. And I started to panic. So we had a neighborhood search. Dorothy, Michelle's mother, didn't tell me where she was going to be or leave a number other than to say that she was going to see her family. And I didn't have a number to call her either. Then I just pointed my car to the nearest police station and reported her missing. We went over the last time I approximately saw her when she came inside the house. Probably around 2 in the afternoon. And that's really the last time I laid eyes on her. The police, they took it very seriously. That night there wasn't anything I could do, and I was worried to death. The following day, the detectives, wanted to start doing investigating and asking questions and that sort of thing. They pretty much just wanted the facts, and one of the things they wanted me to do to clear the parents was to take a polygraph test, which I immediately agreed to. Of course, they start with easy questions like, what is your name, date, and birthday? And then they started asking questions about Michelle. I told them that the best I could remember last seeing Michelle was around 2 o'clock that Saturday afternoon. But I wasn't sure. But I had been watching the clock. And then they started asking questions about if I had done any harm to Michelle. And then later, Detective Farrell told me I failed the polygraph test. And I said, "No, you've got the wrong guy." And he says, "No, I've talked to Michelle's mother. And And she tells me that you would have done something with Michelle. And I'm accusing you of having killed your daughter.
Carl Dora was Michelle's father, and he was married to Dorothy, or Dee Dee as we call her. That marriage had fallen on tough times, and there had been a lot of negative comments made, including Carl threatening to the effect of, if I can't have Michelle, you won't have her either. So they put a lot of time and energy into really cracking Carl Dora, trying to find out if he had a horrible secret that was going to solve the case very quickly.
I knew I was the suspect at that point. The detective was in my face, screaming at me. If we don't find a child like Michelle's age, and it's been over 24 hours, that means your child is going to end up dead. It was a terrible, terrible experience. And it was going to drive me nuts.
The police canvassed the neighborhood to see what kind of information anyone would have. One thing that was helpful was a gardener nearby who, during the course of that afternoon, wanted to borrow a telephone from the Clark household, who lived next door to the Michelle door. So he was in the doorstep of the Clark household, and he was met by Jeff Clark's brother, Haddon, who briefly talked to him. He remembered asking for a phone, but also seeing a small girl inside the house. No real deep description there, but something that at least started to make that link between Michelle Dora and the Clark household.
I remember the kids and I were out back there cooking hamburgers and hot dogs and having a, Memorial Day weekend kind of day when all of a sudden these cops come swarming into the backyard. Michelle was missing, and they asked about her, so I was like, go through the yard, look, but the general questions they were asking if, when we'd last seen Michelle, where we had been, and of course they asked about Haddon. So, unfortunately, as you look around my home and you see the chaotic nature that I live in, here's a few pictures I found. So this is me right here in the middle. This is Brad. This is Haddon. Haddon was born in 1952. I was born in 1955. My brother Haddon had serious developmental issues when he was still very little. My mother worked very hard to provide what she could. Haddon could smile. He could do nothing else. He could at least give a good smile once in a while. Things were wrong with Haddon from the start.
This is a prepaid call from Haddon Clark, an inmate at the Maryland Correctional Facility. You get my letter I wrote last week?
Yeah. I saw your mom. She called you bad names.
My brothers and sisters called their friends out of it.
How did that make you feel?
It hurt me mentally.
He didn't talk. I remember stories about my mom having people over and just manipulating his body when he was really little, trying to get his muscles moving.
Did a lot of people tease you?
Yes, lots.
When I was starting to walk, my mom would knock me down to try to prevent me from getting the gist of it, because Haddon wasn't walking yet. There were mental things that were not right.
I was raised like a girl anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Why did they raise you like a girl?
Sometimes my parents would see that as a punishment. Instead of getting physical with me, they had me wear a dress for school.
If you were to describe your mother in one sentence, what would you say as a child?
If someone showed me a picture of her right now, I'd probably tear it up. My mom was an alcoholic. But most of the time, I try to keep people. Keep me a lot of people think. son.
Had spent a lot of time in different specialized schools to try to deal with the just other matters that caused him to be antisocial.
My family moved to Ohio, and I stayed back in Pennsylvania so I could go to a trade school.
When he graduated from high school, I guess that would be 70 or so. Hadden got into the Culinary Institute of America, and after that, he just started traveling around, taking jobs here and there.
We started to see this pattern. He'd have a job, he'd get fired, he'd take off with all of the cutlery and slash all the tires in the parking lot. In 1985, Hadden had been discharged from the Navy, and he was kind of in between work, in between housing, so he went to stay with his brother for a while.
He had no place to go, and he needed my help. So I invited him to come stay for 6 months. I met Stephanie, who became my wife, during the time Hadden was living here. And I didn't want him to know her. I didn't want her to know him. So I asked him to move out because he'd already overextended the time I had offered to him by more than double.
On the day Michelle disappeared, Jeff ordered him to leave. And Jeff took his family with him, including Elizabeth, just to kind of clear the way to let Hadden get his stuff together and get out of that house.
So we were gone for hours.
A short time later, the detectives brought Hadden to the Montgomery County Police Department to talk. On the day in question, he basically said he was at his job at Chevy Chase Country Club, and eventually there was a time card that was presented to them that showed being at the club at 2:46 p.m. If the times were rigid, if 2:10 was exactly the last time that Carl had seen his daughter, and if 2:46 was exactly the time that Hadden Clark showed up for work at the Chevy Chase Country Club, it was a pretty effective alibi. It was literally going to be impossible to show that this man had time in that window to kidnap a small child or clean up the crime scene as he might need to do. Law enforcement didn't spend any real time and resources focusing on Hadden Clark at that point, any more than any other neighbor.
As I was watching the news, I guess on Saturday night.
All I can say is basically we are asking a lot of questions. Part of the investigation is questioning people. We have to question all of the family members.
I started hallucinating. I thought the police were talking about me or something odd, and it's just a disintegration of my mental health. I got this delusional thinking that I could somehow, bring her back to life or something. It was just the only way I could cope. It was the only hope I had of ever seeing her alive again. Days after Michelle was missing, I had this delusion of grandeur that I had this power of resurrection. And if I had that power, then I must be Jesus. So I went to tell Michelle's mother. And unfortunately, this guy, Edward Jagan, was there. Ed Jagan was a private investigator that had injected himself into the search for Michelle. Earlier that week, for some reason, Ed Jagan was obsessed with the crawl space under my bedroom in Silver Spring. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe he's killed my daughter. And he's giving me all of these clues that he's buried Michelle under my crawl space. So I accused him of being the devil and to go to my house in Silver Spring and find Michelle. So they called the police, and that's where they searched.
Michelle disappeared from her father's home. He's given conflicting accounts of the event, including claiming to have buried her in his house.
And that's the story that got out in 1986, that I confessed to killing Michelle and burying her in the crawl space.
So at no point did you ever confess?
At no point did I ever confess to myself having killed Michelle.
Carl Dorr was saying all sorts of outlandish things, such as she's under a crawl space. They would go check the places that he specifically identified, and there was nothing there. And so they realized during that interrogation, this guy was losing it. I mean, the stress of losing his daughter, the stress of being accused, the stress of public accusation, all of that conspired to put Carl Dorr in a terrible state of mind.
The waiting and hoping go on, but tonight the physical search for 6-year-old Michelle Dorr is ended. Michelle's father is no longer under psychiatric evaluation. What do you hope for?
I hope that somebody has her that hasn't harmed her. That's what I hope.
Do you still feel that you'll see her someday?
I hope to God, yes.
Like any homicide case, time is not usually your friend if you're trying to solve it. And in this case, Michelle's body was not turning up. And it just got to a point where it started to fade from public conscience. It was really nowhere to go. In October of 1992, there's another high-profile missing person in Montgomery County.
She was a resident of Bethesda. She lived there with her mother when she wasn't in school. My name is Ed Tarney. I was a detective investigator in the Major Crimes Division of Montgomery County Police. At that time, Haddon Clark was working for her mother as a gardener.
I'm Richard Fallon, and I'm a retired Montgomery County Police homicide detective. We told her sergeant that the gardener was a guy named Haddon Clark. Well, the sergeant just froze and looked at me and he said, "Haddon Clark?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That was the suspect of Michelle Dorr." After we started looking into the Michelle Dorr case, we go back and try to figure out what happened. Why wasn't Haddon a suspect here? And we find out, well, he was, but he had an alibi. And so I said, okay, well, we'll check that out.
There was a very short period there, from Carl seeing her last to Haddon punching his time card. So Carl essentially had given Haddon Clark an alibi because of the time that he said he last saw Michelle. I remember reading in the case file that Carl was just saying some bizarre stuff. Was going through a bitter divorce. His daughter was missing, and the police are all over him. He just had a breakdown. I just put myself in his place, trying to understand why he was acting the way he was. And it just dawned on me. I went to him one afternoon, I said, "Carl, this is what I think happened. I think you fell asleep and you lost track of time, and you didn't want to be blamed as an irresponsible father in this divorce situation. I think you embellished that time." And he admitted to me that was true.
And I'm expected to give them a minute-by-minute blow of what happened that afternoon. I made a statement to the best of my ability at that time. And the best I could do was approximations.
When we talked to him, he started marching the time earlier and earlier in the afternoon to something closer to the lunch hour than 2 o'clock. And that made a big difference in terms of crumbling Haddon Clark's apparent alibi.
It certainly gave Haddon enough time to do his deed. During that investigation, they found out that Haddon, that night, went to Naval Medical Center after he got off work. He had a cut on his hand, maybe cut himself with a knife.
So we're thinking he murdered Michelle Dorr. We just can't prove it.
6-year-old Michelle Dorr vanished over the Memorial Day weekend in 1986 while playing in a wading pool in her father's backyard. At first, police suspected him. Now the case is reopened and police are focusing on Haddon Clark. Clark lived with his brother 2 doors down from Carl Dorr.
As soon as the cops had told us that Michelle was missing, I knew that Haddon was responsible for whatever had happened. At the time, it was only suspicion. There were not yet facts to really back things up.
At the time that Michelle Dorr went missing, Jeff and his new girlfriend had left for the day, and Haddon was left there alone to move his stuff out. And I remember we gathered everything up and went down to the residence, and we did a search.
then came back to us, to me, to ask if they could do forensic work upstairs.
We thought he might have killed Michelle upstairs in Elizabeth's bedroom.
And that led the detectives and the investigators upstairs to this very small room. And they investigated heavily. And one of the things that was most fascinating, the wooden grooves, the wooden slats of the floor, had an appearance of something that had been soaked in a material and then cleaned.
We tore up the entire floor in the bedroom. And that's when the chemist was able to develop what she believed was human blood.
And that's where they found the leftover blood down in the cracks from Michelle.
Montgomery County Police were busy yesterday. In Silver Spring, they were searching for evidence and collected evidence in the home of Jeffrey Clark, Haddon Clark's brother.
At that point, I contacted everybody that lived in that house to find out if anybody had bled in that bedroom. And the prior owners said there was nobody that bled up there. So, was it Michelle's blood? DNA wasn't as developed back then as it is now. So, with that, all we have is mitochondrial DNA.
Mitochondrial DNA was actually very new back in 1999. It's more exclusionary than it is inclusionary. They couldn't say this is Michelle Dorr's blood, but they could say that the blood was inconsistent with the occupants of the house, the Clark family. And when you start with that basic presumption, we have this opportunity to say this is where it happened.
I think I already had a form of knowing that it has happened here. But I'm just so grateful that forensic science has come along.
Bright-eyed 6-year-old Michelle Lee Dorr was last seen alive on May 31st, 1986. Now, 12 years later, police have finally arrested the man they believe to be her killer, Jeffrey Clark's brother, Haddon. Despite extensive searches earlier this year, Michelle Dorr's body has never been found.
There was a lot of challenges in this case, and one of the biggest handicaps was that we did not have a body recovered.
Sometimes a circumstantial case, jurors can understand those, because it's just a common sense thing.
We actually think that Michelle, in a lot of ways, is a victim of him being evicted. Haddon Clark was the type of guy who would get very angry, who would take offense, and who would overreact.
Michelle came to the house. He said that Elizabeth was upstairs playing in the bedroom and she could go on up. Since he was a chef, he had these knives. And that's when he went upstairs and confronted Michelle. And he killed her in Elizabeth's bedroom.
I should have went with my brother's house. That's where all the trouble started.
I welcomed him into my home. He had no place to go. And then, the worst thing of all, is I'm realizing he can't stay here and I tell him he has to leave. He gets so mad at me, he murders a little girl. Oh, God. I don't know how he got evil. I don't know when he got evil.
Haddon Clark was convicted of second-degree murder by the jury. The conviction carried a possible penalty of 30 years. He got 30 years. In the immediate aftermath of the verdict, it was mostly just a feeling of relief.
Michelle was, a 6-year-old with her whole life in front of her. She wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. And that day is not going to happen, unfortunately. I'm just so sorry she was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and she met Haddon Clark.
We were happy we had taken a shot at this case, that we'd gotten a good result, that we'd gotten him off the streets for effectively what would be the rest of his life. But there were open questions. Where was Michelle's body? It always nagged at us, you know.
After Haddon is convicted, he gets sent to the Western Correctional Institute in Western Maryland.
So, Haddon, will you tell me more about your with John Truitt?
John told me to call him Jesus. He's manipulated.
He's full of crap.
He's not Jesus. He's an ass.
God. Well, then, telling you this is bull.
He told me if I called him Jesus, he could get me to a hospital for my mental problem, which was a lie. Here it is.
In 1999, I'm on the third day with Haddon, and I don't know what I'm going to do with him. Some of the stuff he's coming out of his mouth with. He had no problem telling me about how he ate body parts. This is mental stuff. I just told him, I said, look, man, whatever you're saying, just write it down. When you feel like you need to tell me something, draw it, write it. Don't talk to me about it. And he said, okay. And that's when he started, man. He was just going crazy, breaking down. Haddon's art was so creepy.
What was your favorite subject in school?
I would say art. As a kid I had as a child. The only time I got an A in school was art. I always in the town longer.
Why art? Because you can express yourself through the drawings?
I'm not the greatest artist. I'm good enough artist.
Oh, the people have real big eyes. There's drawings of everything. If you see it, you'll go, oh, I don't want to see that no more. He would draw clues to other people he killed. And then he told me he killed Michelle. I was like, oh God, what I wanted to do this guy killing a little girl. I said, why are you telling me? He said, because you're Jesus. He was convinced I was Jesus Christ. I mean, no doubt. He believed that my Father had sent me into the system to help him confess all his crimes and to move on. You're a prisoner. And you're put in with this guy. He's talking to you like you're Jesus Christ, and he believes it. And I started playing with that. I told Haddon, I need to know where this little girl is resting. Then I called my wife, Jackie, and I said, Jackie, please call any law enforcement that you may know that you can trust.
He thought this guy was a nut job, but for some reason Jack thought maybe he could find Michelle's body. Jack called me one night and said that he was in the cell with Haddon Clark and that he had killed a little girl named Michelle Dorr and that her body had never been found.
All I could think about is somebody doing that to my kids. I would hope and pray that they would be doing what I'm doing.
That's when I went to the police department and they gave me Joe Gamble's number.
My name is Joe Gamble. I was a Maryland State Police homicide detective. January of 2000, I traveled to Western Correctional Institute to interview Jack. Jack is pretty laid back, more laid back than I'd ever seen anyone in the prison system. And he's kind of a cool guy.
Back in the 60s and 70s, I was responsible
cannabis to the shore. And I'm kind of proud of it. Jack told me that Haddon had murdered Michelle Dorr and buried her in a park in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Joe would ask him, what do you think about this? I said, I don't think he's lying to me, man.
I then request one of the correctional officers to bring Haddon Clark into the room. I introduced myself to him and said, I understand that you'd like to talk to me, but as long as he stays, looking to Jack. They said, well, he can stay.
That's true. He had told everybody, if Jesus is not with me, I'm not talking.
When I introduced myself, he was quiet. Once we broke through there, it was almost like this more shy kind of person was now kind of excited that he had an audience. And he was very excited about sharing details.
Joe's got the ability. You can trust him. And me being in there, Haddon could pick up. I trusted him.
So Haddon was telling me about how he buried Michelle, where he buried her, and how exactly he did it. Now, back 25, 30 years ago, on a reclining chair, you would have actually a box spring with metal springs, the size of a seat. He said he dug a hole and then put the body in the hole. And then he put a box spring over top of it and then cover that up with dirt and leaves. He said that way animals, if they started digging down, they would run into those metal springs and wouldn't be able to dig the body up. I've dug up a lot of bodies in the woods and in fields all across the state. But never had I encountered someone that had thought it through that well, to actually put a metal box spring over the hole. And I could tell that this man had murdered people before. It was obvious that he had been involved in some very horrific acts. There was no doubt in my mind that there were other victims out there.
Các bạn, hôm nay mình sẽ gửi tới các bạn một nhạc phẩm nữa được thể hiện bởi ca sĩ Thanh Lam. Và cho em một ngày. Cho em một ngày thôi, một ngày không khắc khoải chờ đợi, một ngày không mưa rơi buồn tủi, một ngày không tê tái heo mây. Cho em một ngày thôi, một ngày không có đêm vời vợi, một ngày đôi chân không mệt mỏi, đường về không có lá vàng rơi. Là một ngày anh đến không chỉ hẹn cùng em, một nụ hôn say đắm sau những lời đầu tiên, ngày mùa đông ấm áp trong vòng tay anh nồng nàn, một ngày cho em một ngày dịu dàng. Là một ngày anh đến như nguyện của em, một ngày em reo hát như tiếng cười của anh, ngày mùa đông ấm áp trong vòng tay anh nồng nàn, một ngày cho em một ngày dịu dàng. Cho em một ngày thôi, một ngày không khắc khoải chờ đợi, một ngày không mưa rơi buồn tủi, một ngày không tê tái heo mây. Cho em một ngày thôi, một ngày không có đêm vời vợi, một ngày đôi chân không mệt mỏi, đường về không có lá vàng rơi. Là một ngày anh đến không chết hẹn cùng em, một nụ hôn say đắm sau những lời đầu tiên, ngày mùa đông ấm áp trong vòng tay anh nồng nàn, một ngày cho em một ngày dịu dàng.
protect us from the worst of society. We trust them to uphold the law and keep us safe. But what happens when the protector becomes the predator?
She's performing as the protector of the public. On the other hand, he's actually a really dark monster.
Is that how you obtain this material?
And the people who are meant to keep us safe become dangerous.
I'm arrested on suspicion of attempted murder.
Even though you're a police officer, people will feel that they're above the law.
But how would you catch a criminal who thinks like a cop?
He's got a head start on the investigation team.
He's panicking at this point, and he's not running.
I've enlisted the help of 3 experts. 2 senior officers that have put hundreds of offenders behind bars.
Most people, they know when their back's against the wall and they're going to get convicted for something.
The horror, he's one of us.
And a leading psychologist who can analyse the criminal mind.
Underlying that anger is the need to dominate, is the need to control.
In this series, I'll discover cops who put themselves on the wrong side of the law.
He's like a Jekyll and Hyde character.
Abuse their power and commit horrific crimes.
We should never have had that badge. Ever.
Cops deal with stressful and high-pressured incidents day in, day out. But what happens when a highly trained officer flips and not only commits a terrible crime, but goes on the run?
999, what's your emergency?
A 999 call comes in. It's anonymous, and the caller states they're concerned for the welfare of the woman in a central Manchester hotel.
Which room is she in, caller?
The first responders arrive at the scene, and immediately they're confronted with a room in disarray, of furniture being moved around, and they find Ellie Moxham, unconscious, fighting for her life.
Ellie is a 24-year-old PhD student at Lancaster University. As paramedics start administering treatment, it's clear she's suffered life-threatening injuries.
They start to help her, but as they're helping her, a warrant card is also seen to be left in the room, and it's in the name of serving officer James Riley from Lancashire Police.
Where was James Riley, and what exactly happened in that room? I mean, Ellie's fighting for her life, and the only person who knows what happened is Riley. Is James Riley responsible for the attack, or could he also be a victim? To help me unravel this case, I'm on my way to meet up with former Detective Chief Superintendent Fiona Mallon.
When you turn up at that scene, and you find the warrant card there, you find a female fighting for her life. As a detective, you're open-minded. You're thinking all of the lines of inquiry are possible. Where is that officer? Where is Riley? Are they safe? Have they gone off? What is Riley's role in this? Are they a suspect? We have to find Riley as soon as possible. That's the priority right now. Save Ellie's life and find Riley.
So, James Riley's warrant card was in the room still?
Yes.
So this sounds like he's gone.
Yes. This is moving at a very fast pace. The police need to find Riley, and they need to talk to him to find out what's happened. So a lot is going on at this point. Ellie is being conveyed to hospital or getting emergency surgery and help. The police worked out quickly that it was Riley. He'd called paramedics.
But it puts him at the scene.
Yes. At the same time, police receive a phone call from James Riley's mother, who tells them that James has rung them and said he's killed Ellie and he's going to kill himself.
So Riley's not only confessed to his mum that he's behind the attack, leaving Ellie for dead in a hotel room, now he's threatening to kill himself. What's going on in this guy's mind? This doesn't sound like it was something planned.
No, it sounds very spontaneous. At this point, the police now know James Riley is a suspect and they have to find him as soon as possible.
For any investigator, you'd want to establish where is James Riley.
Former Detective Chief Inspector Howard Groves has decades of experience finding people that want to disappear.
Where is he going to? Is he fleeing the scene to commit suicide? Is he fleeing the scene to go and meet his parents, whatever that may be? So initially, the investigators will be trying to work out exactly where he was. That's got to be your first port of call. The advantage for the inquiry team was that they would have had CCTV footage that they would be able to call upon to try and establish his early movements.
But this time, the person on the run is a cop, desperate to avoid the consequences of his actions. And straight away, Riley is using his police know-how to try and turn the odds in his favour.
Right, so this footage shows Riley leaving via the fire escape.
This is at the hotel?
Yes, it's at the hotel.
Why is he coming down the fire exit?
Well, he's obviously thinking there's no cameras, so he might as well take this route than going back through the reception.
So he's already thinking?
So he's thinking ahead. Quite rightly, he's thinking ahead. We can now see that he's on his phone.
Later in the investigation, police managed to trace the anonymous call to the emergency services. So who's he calling now then?
I would suggest at that point is the ambulance service. It's 11:28, which is roughly the time that he did call the ambulance.
Thing is, though, they said it was an anonymous call, but if he's calling from his mobile, wouldn't they be able to trace that?
They would be able to trace it, but at this moment in time, he didn't give them his details, so they would show it as an anonymous caller.
Right.
So his phone.
Yeah,
he's not looking up for any cameras. He assumes that there's no cameras there. You can see he's wearing what appears to be a green jacket.
Right.
And he's on his phone at that point. He stops.
So he's going down the fire escape?
Yes, he's going down the fire escape.
Just think what he's just done there. He thinks he just left her dead.
He's panicking at this point. And you can see he's out the door and he's still on his phone. And he's now running.
So what do we know where Riley is now?
We know he discarded his phone, and therefore the police would not be in a position to track some of his movements. But even by the sheer chance, when the police find that phone, that's still good evidence that he's trying to keep away from them.
Riley's ditched his phone and he's on the run, trying to stay one step ahead. So what's his next move? To find out, I'm on my way to Manchester to meet Rachel Smith, a local journalist who covered this story. And we saw Riley running down the stairwell. Where does he go from there?
He jumps in his car, which is parked in this car park, and he's getting out of there. He's going as fast as he can. We can see here on the footage, he comes flying down the car park. He's really got his foot down.
Yeah, you can see he's flying, isn't he? Oh, see that nearly hit that wall there?
Yeah.
He's going right on the other side of the road.
Yeah. He's got no concern for safety.
If anyone's coming up that other way, he's hitting them there, isn't he?
Yeah.
And if you look at the time, it's 20 minutes earlier, that's when he would have attacked Ellie.
That's right, yeah.
So it's only 20 minutes gone by, so he's fresh in his mind.
He's just trying to get out of there as quick as possible, isn't he? He's trying to distance himself.
This is the exit of the car park?
Yeah. So he comes flying out.
Oh, that's here?
Yeah.
I can see the car there, yeah.
That's right. And when he comes down here, he doesn't get very far. He gets just a short way down there, and then he crashes his car into this barrier here.
He just crashes here?
Yeah.
What happens then? Is he just off on foot, just running?
Yeah, I mean, he can't hang around, can he?
PC James Riley is now on foot. As far as he knows, he's a murderer, and he's using all his law enforcement expertise to evade capture. So whilst Riley's on the run now, how's Ellie? What's happened to her?
Ellie's in a life-threatening situation now. It looks like she's been strangled, and her brain has struggled because of the lack of oxygen. She's put into an induced coma, and we wait to see if she's going to make it.
It's midnight on Thursday, the 10th of November 2022, and in central Manchester, a desperate manhunt is underway. PC James Riley is on the run after a brutal attack on his ex-girlfriend, starting a cat-and-mouse chase with his police colleagues across the northwest of England.
So he was thinking ahead as to how he was going to be one step ahead of his colleagues. You dispose of your phone because those things will be able to track where you are. And if you're a police officer, you will know those things even more than the average person on the street.
In this situation, when you've got a lady fighting for her life, you've got a suspect on the loose, what's it like being the head of that manhunt?
A manhunt is a fast operation, and most senior officers will have come across those sort of circumstances. You have to prioritize how you're going to deal with that investigation, and a lot will be dependent on what evidence you may have already at your disposal. So if you've got CCTV evidence, you can use that to identify where someone's heading, or shows you a bit of the actual crime itself. Those things are useful, but you're always having to think, we need to get to this person before they dispose of evidence, before they go underground and you can't find them for weeks and months, because then that will hinder the investigation going forward. So a manhunt is a significant part of policing that has to be dealt with in an effective manner.
When Riley called his mum to confess at around 11:15 that evening, he also threatened he was going to kill himself.
The investigation team would be reviewing Riley in both ways. A, because he's left his warrant card behind. Is that a sign now that he's leaving his identity as a police officer behind, and now he's going to treat himself as a member of the public, and he's going to cause harm to himself or somebody else? Or is it a ruse to try and start his escape plan? He's now got to do everything he can to stop the investigation following him, so they're looking at it as a suspect, but also as someone to wrap around, safeguard, and stop any more risk.
In a fast-moving manhunt, piecing together CCTV can provide valuable information to the investigators.
In this footage now, you can see clearly that's Riley, but if you notice, there's one thing that's missing. He's not wearing his coat at this point, so he's discarded his coat in the vehicle or somewhere nearby.
Well, has he done that on purpose, you think?
I'd think he was set on getting away from it.
He looks a bit calmer now, though. He's not running anymore. Is that to not draw attention to himself?
Well, if he starts running and there's nobody running behind him or in front of him, he's going to be drawing attention. So you can see Riley now approaching what we now know is an ATM machine. We know at this point he draws £250 in cash.
Why does he need cash?
Well, he doesn't want anybody to be able to find where he's been by using his credit card. That's going to leave an audit trail. If you have cash, you just pay by that means.
So he's thinking of maybe going on the run with cash?
Exactly. Here he is. You can clearly see that's him again.
He's looking over his shoulder a bit though, isn't he? So he's probably thinking.
He's probably contemplating what he's going to do next.
A short while earlier, in a phone call to his mother, Riley had threatened to take his own life. But judging by his actions, there's more evidence of him trying to escape than following through on that threat. The fact that Riley says he's going to kill himself, what do you make of that?
I think it's self-indulgent. It's feeling sorry for himself now. There was no evidence to suggest he was going to go through with it. So he's never found any material or written stuff or anything that he was actually going to kill himself. It just feels like it was to mum and dad, a plea for help, I don't know, childlike maybe. But for me, it's very cowardly. I'm going to end it now. And he wants the attention back on himself, away from what he's done on himself. And why would he keep running and running?
Yeah. Riley is in panic mode, but he's savvy. He knows exactly how to throw the police off his trail, because he's one of them. It's around an hour after the attack on Ellie Moxham, and James Riley is steadily making his way out of the city centre, heading north.
Is getting away as quick as possible. The best thing to do is go on a bus. No one's going to be stopping the bus per se unless they had the footage to say he's gone on a bus. At that point, the police officers wouldn't have that information to them.
Even though he's panicking, he's still using his police knowledge a little bit.
And it's only a matter of 3 or 4 minutes before he gets off of the bus.
Riley disappears off the grid before reappearing at a service station 30 miles away. He knows motorways are the fastest way to put distance between himself and his police colleagues. 2 o'clock in the morning.
It's almost 2.5 hours since he made the phone call. So he's some distance away.
He's covered quite a lot of distance, and we only saw him get on a bus. How's he got that far then?
He would have used a taxi. So he was just trying to change up the routes that he was taking, because he would have known that his colleagues would be looking at all of those opportunities to work out how he got from A to B.
And at this point, he thinks Ellie's dead.
Yeah, and he's probably contemplating that. She's dead. What he's going to do next?
But as police raced to apprehend Riley, they discovered that he wasn't trying to flee the country. Instead, he was trying to get back to the place he knows best, his family home in Bradford.
So we know that once Riley gets to Mum and Dad's house, Mum and Dad do everything they can to sort of keep him there. So Dad secures the house, locks the doors. Mum is obviously phoned the police. However, Riley is determined to get away.
What Riley didn't realise was that his fellow officers were prepared.
The officers knew that he rang his parents. So the first question they'd have asked the parents was, where do you live? And they'd have confirmed that by voters registry and all the other things that they can do. And when he applied for the police service, I'm sure he gave his parents' address. So they would just want to confirm that, and then they'd be looking to get hold of local officers to say, we think Riley may be heading to his parents. They would have officers in plain clothes, close to where his parents live. What they didn't want is a marked police vehicle, because if he turns up and he sees that, he's going to be legging it in the opposite direction. So they'd want a discreet observation position, so that if he turns up, they'd wait for him to get into the address.
The net's closing in on Riley, but true to form, rather than come quietly, he makes one last dash for freedom. At what point do they actually arrest Riley?
When Riley gets to the address and his father locks the door so he couldn't leave, he went into the bathroom and then locked the door from the inside so that no one could get in. he more than likely was aware that police were nearby. I would have thought that there would have been blue lights flashing outside the home at that time of the morning. And he decided that he would exit the house through the bathroom window. But within minutes of him getting out through the bathroom window, he was apprehended.
This just sounds chaotic. After a massive manhunt involving 3 police forces over 2 counties lasting several hours, PC James Riley was finally caught. In the early hours of November 11th, 2022, he was arrested on the street after climbing out of his parents' bathroom window. With Riley now in custody, investigators can start building their case against him. All this footage that they've got, they've just got so much evidence, haven't they, the police?
Yeah, the officers will be reasonably satisfied. What they have to do is build up a timeline. From the moment he leaves the hotel, based on the phone calls he made, exactly when he leaves, you can see the emergency services vehicle turning up, so that's another good timeline.
And they know whereabouts he is in the country.
Exactly, they know where he is. When he gets the bus has got CCTV, that's showing a timeline. To get the sequence of events correct, there's always a possibility that the timing on the CCTV footage could be out by minutes, even more than that. So the officers would then make sure that they had another officer who would go out and map that route exactly that Riley took. So they were confident that the timelines fit the scenario that they're going to show to the jury.
When would the police actually try to access all this kind of information?
They would be seeking to access this information straight away.
Really?
Yes, because the hotel has the mechanisms for them to go and ask them to download that information for them. But that would be majority of this activity. They would then pick it up maybe 24 hours later, because they'd look at the different opportunities to gather CCTV, and then they would try and do a compilation showing exactly what happened. So there would have been officers that would have turned up at the hotel who would have been looking at CCTV footage.
With the investigation underway, I want to learn who James Riley is and what his connection is to Ellie Moxham. And what could you tell me about James Riley?
So James Riley was 27 years old. He was a member of Lancashire Police Force. He'd met Ellie Moxham at the University of Lancaster. They studied together, and then their relationship had continued through, and then they bought a house together in 2021. She was doing a PhD at Lancaster University, well at her feet, loads of opportunities, and were together as a partnership. However, what is really apparent is their relationship after buying the house, possibly before, is breaking down very quickly. But Ellie's making it quite clear that she's not interested in Riley anymore. What happens though, leading to that night, they'd already booked an event to go out together before breaking up.
Right. It was a final farewell, to which Ellie would wish she'd never shown up. In an investigation, you'd want to speak to any witnesses, and in this case, there was no better witness than Ellie. When it comes to Ellie, what's her injuries like? Is she going to survive?
She's taken to hospital. She's put in an induced coma, so she's not in a position at that stage to provide the police with this set of circumstances that resulted in her injury. She was unable to explain a lot of what happened simply because of the injuries that she received. She was unable to give any significant evidence or information as to the circumstances surrounding the attack.
With Ellie unable to say what happened on the night of the 10th of November 2022, the question now was, why did it happen? On the surface, Riley and Ellie were doing well. They got together at uni, they had good jobs, they bought a house together. What happened for Riley to leave Ellie for dead on a hotel room floor? Doesn't make sense. Local journalist Rachel Smith gives more insight as to why Riley may have flipped. But how do we end up here at this hotel?
Well, we know that they got tickets to go to a concert at the Manchester Apollo. Although the relationship had turned sour by that point and it was looking like it was over, they'd obviously not wanted to waste the tickets, so they'd come along to enjoy the evening.
And after the concert, they come back to this hotel?
That's right, yeah. They come back to the hotel room and they both go into the room together, but unfortunately, Riley's the only one that leaves that hotel room safe.
Well, what happened then in the room?
At some point over the evening, Riley realises that Ellie's been speaking to another guy. She's been texting him and, things are getting off the ground. Now, he's obviously very, very jealous about this. And they go back to the room. From what we know, sometime around 11 o'clock, he just lost his temper and he attacked her really badly.
How does a police officer lose control so badly that he leaves the woman he's supposed to love for dead? And for that matter, how did he ever become a cop in the first place? November 12, 2022, PC James Riley was behind bars for viciously assaulting his ex-girlfriend and leaving her for dead in a Manchester hotel room. But how does anyone, let alone a cop, just snap? To discover more about Riley's relationship with Ellie Moxham, I'm speaking with psychologist Serena Simmons.
Ellie was a young woman in her 20s. She was living a very, very full life. She had gone to university, and that is actually where she'd met Riley. And I think from what we know, although she was trying to live life to the full and she went on to do a PhD, so a very, very intelligent young woman, she actually really struggled in her relationship with Riley.
What could you tell me about Riley?
Riley was a more complicated character. So he was a police officer, so we know that that lends itself to him being able to be professional and hold down a job. He was also educated and had gone to university. But we know that in his relationship with Ellie, he was actually very, very possessive, very, very jealous character. And I think that shows more of his true personality coming through. So there was a lot of jealousy and protectiveness and possessiveness, really, directed towards Ellie.
Had that been from the start, or did that end up getting worse as time went on?
We get a sense when we look at their relationship from the outside. They're a young couple. They met at university. They clearly had a lot in common. They probably enjoyed each other's company to start with, and there would have been so many reasons that she wanted to really nurture this relationship with him. But obviously, over time, his true personality started to come out, and I think she found that just increasingly challenging as time went on.
How did Ellie actually see Riley as a person and how he treated her?
Ellie actually describes herself as feeling like she's often walking on eggshells when she's with Riley. So there's a sense that she can't really be herself in that relationship because he is so jealous, he is so possessive.
Why do people behave like that in relationships? Why do people become possessive and controlling?
You get the sense that Ellie became his whole world, that he put a lot of focus on her, that the emphasis of his life kind of was directed towards her, that he kind of made her his everything. And I think that's why you see that element of possessiveness. I think he definitely felt like he had some kind of ownership over her.
But wouldn't that just drive Ellie away rather than make her want to be with him more? Should he do the opposite, wouldn't it?
There are definite signs of them drifting apart at this point. So we know that Ellie had started to see somebody else, and yet they had this pre-planned event. So prior to them breaking up, they had actually organised to go to a concert together. And they agreed to still go to that to honour the fact that they had booked it prior. And I think this is Ellie trying to show Riley that she can and still wants to be friends with him in some way. They've known each other a really, really long time. So if you think about their relationship, they've been together since university. And arguably, Ellie, there's some friendship that's the basis of that relationship, and she wants to maintain that. And I think this is her saying, look, we can still be friends. These are the kind of things that we can do together if we stay friends. I'm really, really willing to do that.
Yeah, and it's a bit of empathy from her part as well. For Riley, does he see this opportunity of going to this concert together as maybe we can rekindle things? Maybe this is my chance to get back with Ellie?
I think Ellie saw it as a purely platonic interaction. But for Riley, I do think that he was reading into this, that not only did it mean more that she agreed to still go, but that he might even be able to use this as an opportunity to lure her back and kind of encourage her to come back to him in some way.
But if Riley thought this was his opportunity to win Ellie back, he was sorely mistaken.
Ellie's making it quite clear that she's not interested in Riley anymore. And what was apparent from the evidence is that Riley pressurises Ellie to go to that gig. She does it for the sake of playing along, being nice, the end of their relationship. They go back to the room where Riley thinks they're going to make it up to get back together as a partnership. However, the key point as they're going into the bedroom, Riley discovers that Ellie's got messages from another chap on her phone, and she's actually really keen on him, and she wants to start a proper relationship with this other man. And the evidence suggests this is a trigger point, then he loses complete control.
An examination of Ellie shows that she was subjected to a sustained and deliberate attack in which Riley tried to strangle the life out of her. For Riley to put his hands around Ellie's neck, someone he supposedly loved, is a real direct, determined, angry thing to do.
And it's personal. So the whole time, you're looking into the face of that person you love, whatever strange version of love he had or has, you're looking into their face. And it would have taken seconds and more seconds, possibly over minutes, for that level of pressure on that person's neck. And then we know a bag was found nearby. Now, whether the bag was part of that or suffocation, but when he's asked about it, he says he couldn't bear to look at her face. He put the bag over her head. But that's having just strangled her face to face.
Well, he strangled it until she'd gone unconscious, because he said, I've just killed Ellie. So he thinks she's dead. There's a lot of time that has passed by where he could have stopped. That's my point. People say, oh, he just snapped. That's not just like punching someone.
No.
He's looked at her and strangled her until he believed he'd killed her. Would Riley have ever been involved in turning up as a police officer to domestic abuse and being on the other side of the table to what he's just done to Ellie?
Definitely. There's a first-line officer, response officer. He's gone out to every type of crime, met vulnerable victims, been part of domestic abuse arguments and seen what's happening there, domestic homicides potentially. Yes, he would have seen it all, but he didn't then transpose that onto himself, his own situation. I think he separated himself and thought he was, his home life and how he behaved was different to what he'd seen and dealt with.
So we don't look at Riley here as somebody who has planned an attack on Ellie. He actually is quite obsessed with her and he wants to be with her. And when he realises that's not going to be the case, he's just snapped.
Exactly. There's no suggestion or evidence to say this was planned or premeditated. He's had high hopes. This meeting at the arena was going to be their get-together, their reconciliation. They have a house together. He thinks the future, and she's saying no. And these are the messages I've got with another chap. I want to go in a different direction.
Rejection is never easy to cope with. But what's shocking in this instance is how Riley, a trained police officer, responds with such brutal violence towards someone he claimed to love.
All of those built-up feelings I think he's had for a really, really long time, the hope, the desire, encouraging her to stay with him, when he realises that that's just not going to happen, I think this is when he basically snaps at this point, and you just see that rage and the anger of not getting what he wants come to the surface.
Say Riley lost his head for a minute and just reacted in a horrible way. Then when he realises what he's done, it's what he does next. Why didn't he just call the police or an ambulance and go, well, what have I done, But instead he calls his family.
You would hope that something would happen in his psyche, in his mindset, that would say the right thing to do is to call an ambulance, to call the police. And yet, he does think he's killed somebody. And what he does instead is he wastes crucial time. So Ellie suffered incredible injuries after that. Not only was it a really traumatic event, but she was physically hurt in a really, really significant way. So those 10 minutes made a really, really big difference to her health going forward.
Not only did Riley delay medical help for Ellie, but this grown man, a police officer, actually called his mum rather than the emergency services. What on earth was he thinking?
I think this is, for me, quite typical of what we see with some offenders who want to very quickly put themselves in victim state. So on face value, it looks very innocent. It looks like he's just called his parents. But what he was telling them was, I'm going to kill myself. So suddenly the focus is off of what he's done to someone else and he's shifting the focus onto him. He's now victim. Poor me, I'm really distressed, look at what I've done, this is what I'm going to do to myself. And that in itself is another way of deflecting from the real situation and really taking the emotional centre stage and kind of changing the dynamic of what we should be focused on, which at that point should have been Ellie.
This is someone who's professionally trained to remain calm, to diffuse situations. But in his personal life, he's doing the exact opposite. Surely, being a police officer, his job is to be able to control his emotions, right?
It looks like a switch has gone off because there's no evidence prior of him being outwardly violent or aggressive. But clearly, anger was there. Anger was able to come to the surface. And as someone who's a police officer, this is something that you would hope that they would have more control over. This is completely the opposite with this case.
So not planned at all, he's just, in that moment, thought, I'm going to kill her. And he tried to kill her, right?
In my opinion, he did try to kill her.
Believing he was now a murderer, Riley desperately tried to outrun his fellow officers in his bid to get to his mum and dad's house in Bradford.
Because Riley is a police officer and he knows the area really well, so he's got his local intelligence up to date. He knows the best routes out of the city. He knows where he can get money. He knows where he can get help. He knows where CCTV is because of all the investigations he would have done. He's got a head start. He's got a head start on the investigation team with that knowledge as a police officer, and his training and everything he'd have done up to that point would help him.
Is he using any of his police knowledge in trying to get away? Is there any evidence of that?
He's drawing cash out at 2 separate ATMs, but either side of midnight, because he'd reached his maximum limit on his account.
Right.
So that's why we've got him at 2 separate locations the other side of midnight.
So he's drawn out as much as he can get. So he is thinking of going on the run then, obviously.
Yes, he's getting rid of his phone and he's changing his mode of transport all the time to keep on the move. So he's trying to lose the trail behind him. He's thinking now and he's planning. He's kicked into, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of the way of being arrested?
When he's left that room, he's left in a hurry because he's panicked, left his warrant card there. But now as time's settled, he's turned into, right, what? His police brain's kicked in. And he's starting to think, I know what they're going to be looking for. And this is how they can't trace my steps. Riley's panic at the hotel has now shifted to cold, calculated thinking. His police instincts kicked in. He knew exactly how to try and avoid capture. But soon, the full story would unravel in court. At 4 a.m. on the 11th of November 2022, PC James Riley was arrested for the attempted murder of his ex-girlfriend, Ellie Moxham. A manhunt across 3 counties ended up at his parents' home in Bradford after his own mother called the police. You can only imagine what it was like for his parents. A, getting that phone call, I've just killed Ellie and I'm going to kill myself. And B, he rocks up early hours of the morning and he turns up at their house. That must have been like for them.
His parents would have been in a very difficult position. Irrespective of the crimes that Riley has committed, it's still their boy. So they have a sense of allegiance to him. But at the same time, they did the right thing because as soon as he turned up at their address, the father locked the front door so he couldn't go out and called the police.
I imagine it was very challenging for them to know what to do in terms of this is their son who's done something absolutely horrific. And also just trying to gauge what happened. Is it the truth? What's really happened? Have you really done that? So they must have been really struggling to kind of process and make sense of the things that he was telling them. The only thing that really made sense that they did was they did call the police themselves, which was absolutely the right thing to do. And in doing so, the police came to the house while Riley then escaped out of a bathroom window, which again shows how desperate he was just to evade that detection and evade being questioned by police for what he'd done.
After Riley's arrest, police wasted no time questioning him at the station about the brutal attack on Ellie Moxham the previous evening.
Riley would have been well aware of the severity of what he was doing. You're not going to strangle someone for 2 minutes and not appreciate that you're going to cause significant brain damage to that individual. But he was only prepared to say that he was angry and that he strangled her, but he didn't intend to kill her. So it was then going to be for the investigators, along with the CS ultimately, to decide whether or not they felt that there was sufficient evidence based on the medical evidence that would be provided as to whether or not it was worthy of them to actually charge him with attempted murder.
With Riley in custody, the investigation passes all the collated evidence to the CPS. On the 24th of April 2023, James Riley is brought before a judge at Manchester Crown Court. After Riley's been arrested, what happens when he goes to court?
Well, it's not as straightforward as you'd think. He didn't plead guilty straight away. The prosecution had built a really strong case. They had a confession to his parents, but unfortunately Ellie herself didn't really remember the attack.
What evidence did they actually have on Riley?
Well, they had the CCTV, and really importantly, they had that phone call to his parents.
And the warrant card as well left at the scene?
That's right, yeah, he'd left his card there.
Do you think he believes he's not going to get away with this then because he didn't plead guilty?
He drags it out. He really drags it out. He was charged with GBH, but once they'd seen the extent of Ellie's injuries and all the evidence, that charge was upgraded to attempted murder. It's a rare charge. It can be quite hard to prove, so I think he's dragged it out and out and out.
Do you think it made any difference, the fact he was a police officer?
He's got knowledge, hasn't he? He understands how the system works. He would be aware of just what he's up against. Ultimately, though, I think that him dragging that out, I think that was a final act of control over Ellie.
Really?
Yeah, you see it all the time. She's got to get ready for the trial then, and she's got all the stress and all the worry of thinking she's going to have to face him in court while she doesn't really remember what's happened to her.
Is he thinking as a police officer, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So I'm not going to give you anything, but you have to prove that I've done this.
That sounds fair, and that's what I say about that attempted murder charge, is it can be very difficult to prove, so he's not coughed to anything.
But even with his police knowledge, this was the end of the line for PC James Riley.
Right just before the trial is about to be heard, he decides then and then, okay, I'll plead. The evidence is so strong against me, I'll plead.
What does he plead?
And he goes for guilty. And that that's when he gets convicted.
On the 12th of January 2024, James Riley was sentenced to 16 years for the attempted murder of Ellie Moxham. Was there any comments the judge made?
Yeah, the judge said that Riley was consumed with uncontrollable anger and he said he had murderous intent.
Riley was a cop no more. He was a criminal. His actions betrayed the core values that a police officer should hold.
One of the things that a lot of times when police officers are arrested and convicted of crimes, there's always this debate about the public losing trust. I think in this set of circumstances, I'm not necessarily sure that Ellie may have a distrust of police because the work that they did from the moment they realized that she had been attacked to the moment that Riley gets arrested some 4.5 hours later, I'd like to think that she would be complimentary in terms of how the investigation was conducted by the police officers. The relationship that she had with Riley was a completely separate matter. She will hate him for the rest of her life, and so she should. But I don't necessarily think that she would want to feel that police officers shouldn't be trusted.
As for Ellie, she had survived Riley's brutal attack, but it has left a deep and lasting mark.
Ellie has been explicit in how she's felt since the event and has said that she has felt incredibly stressed, that she now suffers with anxiety, night terrors, sleep disorders, that she has trust issues and is having to navigate future relationships because of what's happened to her. This is a significant psychological impact on someone that doesn't just impact them at the moment of the offence or the immediate aftermath, but for the rest of her life.
Was there ever any remorse from Riley?
Well, Riley has shown to be remorseful. He says he's incredibly sorry for what he's done, and he's agreed to never contact Ellie again, which was one of the conditions of his conviction. However, we also know that he's still holding a little bit of that possession and control. So they did actually own a house together, and they owned a joint mortgage, and from what we know, he refuses to relinquish that mortgage so she can sell the property, which shows that he's just holding on to those little threads of control that he may still have behind those bars.
He just can't let go completely, can he?
No.
James Riley's behaviour paints a disturbing picture and raises serious questions about how someone like him could have passed police vetting in the first place. Looking at Riley and how you've described him, controlling, coercive behaviour, surely them kind of traits means you shouldn't be a police officer.
Exactly, those traits mean they shouldn't be police officers, but there's no test that we do psychological testing in terms of looking for those behaviours. There's nothing in the vetting checks or any sort of misconduct files or anything around loss of control, any sort of behaviour issues, any sort of domineering traits or anything like that. So he'd have quite easily got through a vetting process and carried on his career.
Do you think then that is what attracted him to be a police officer? Because you get to have all that power, and narcissist and control freaks are addicted to power.
It may well be the ability to take away someone's liberty, the uniform, the warrant card, the cuffs, everything that comes with being a police officer, the power. Yes, that may have attracted him. His personality traits may have fell perfectly into that type of a police officer role, definitely.
Riley lost control, and he lost it so badly, he strangled the woman he loved, almost killed her. And even then, he didn't do the right thing and phone an ambulance. He went on the run. This man wasn't fit to be a cop. He didn't deserve to wear the uniform. At least now he's where he belongs, behind bars.